Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. And we're going to do now just a quick season review of The Mandalorian. Now, I'm sure everybody knows this was their first live action Star Wars series, and it was really the front running show for Disney Plus streaming service. I think this premiered way back in November 2019, and there was a lot of hype about the show because it was a continuation of the Star Wars franchise. It's set place 5 years after the events of the Return of the Jedi, where essentially the Galactic Empire has been defeated. So we're dealing with what the galaxy kind of looks like following the resolution to that conflict, and it's actually set 20 years before the Force Awakens, right? So you've got that kind of in between story arc, and we see developments going on here. So as we all know, just in case you didn't know, there's no kind of Jedi or large scale space battles here. This is very much more of a lower scale, more intimate kind of story driven here in the storyline. So there was a lot of hype about The Mandalorian because I think people, when we saw all the trailers and the footage, they thought this is going to be a much more, if you like, edgier kind of show, right? Because people, and we've had this whole toxic debate about Star Wars, as we all know. People, a lot of fans are very divided about the Disney Star Wars movies, how they felt they haven't been true to the characters, they've lost the spirit of Star Wars. We've had all this back and forth about, George Lucas and Kathleen Kennedy. If you just go on YouTube, there's this whole swath of just, I think toxicity is the best way to put it about the current Star Wars franchise. So when Mandalorian came out, particularly after the negative feedback from The Last Jedi, everybody was kind of excited. We're going to get less Jedi and less space battles, and we're going to focus a lot more on, if you like, on the bounty hunters. And it kind of had this kind of Western loner feel about it. It concentrates on the adventures of this bounty hunter who essentially has these solo adventures. He basically will go to a planet, he'll have a mission to do or a job to do, a certain target to get out. He'll receive certain money for this. He gets himself into a certain situation, he gets himself out of a situation, he gets rewarded for fulfilling his mission, and then he moves on to the next planet. And that really, in a nutshell, is The Mandalorian. Without spoiling it, I mean, there's not really, I would say, too much to spoil, but that is basically the nuts and bolts of the Mandalorian. It's just him going on these standalone missions, and as I said, going about with these standalone adventures, completing them within a set episode, and then just leaving and going on to the next planet. That is it in a nutshell. So I'm just going to talk about quickly what I thought was good about the show and what was bad about the show. So there will be spoiler elements here. So it is now, I believe, now on Disney Plus. I did see it a while ago, the show, but it's now on Disney Plus. So I assume now a lot of people in Europe as well have seen this show, and they're getting through it now. So, but there are spoiler elements here. So if you haven't seen all of the show, tune away now, watch the show, come back, and we can talk about it more, with this video on here. So yeah, what was good about it? So the production levels, they were very high. Mandalorian had a supremely high budget. Again, much like Game of Thrones and Star Trek Discovery, we're seeing a lot of these television shows basically have cinematic budget, and you can see it with The Mandalorian. Visually, it looks fantastic. The planet landscapes, the spaceships, the whole sound. It's got that typical starship sound that you associate with Star Wars. The visual kind of battles and the action set sequences, they're all on point. It all looks fantastic to watch. It is literally, particularly if you watch this movie in HD, you do think it's literally like got that Star Wars movie kind of quality about it. It's kind of got that dark greyish aesthetic as what we got with Rogue One, right? As opposed to the brighter, colourful tones of the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy, or indeed the sequel trilogy, the Star Wars, right? This is a much more, again, as I mentioned, they're going for a much more grittier take on it, and it just looks great. The production values, the music, the cinematography. I like the theme music intro, or it's more the outro, this is the end credit sequence. I like that a lot. Everything just looks fantastic. The performances are great. We have Pablo Pascal, who, for the most part of the season, I don't think that's too spoilerific to say, has the helmet on. That's the whole mystery of the kind of the Mandalorian bounty hunter. You don't really see their face. It's part of their code to never take their helmets off. he does primarily voiceover work for this, and he's really good in that. It's very, good when you see an actor being able to engage you as a character despite the fact that you don't see their face. We have Carl Weathers, who's kind of operator here, who sends Mandalorian, or he's got certain jobs for the Mandalorian. He was really good. It's always great to see Carl Weathers, growing up as the 80s. We all know him from Apollo Creed, of course, and as Dylan from the Predator movies, and Action Jackson as well. So just great to see Carl Weathers back. I know he's done other television shows and such, but just great to see him in a kind of a mainstream project. I also enjoy Gina Carano as a role. Again, she's this kind of fearless warrior. She's kind of picked up. I can't remember, it's the third or fourth episode, and she helps out with the Mandalorian with his various missions. And I've always had favoritism towards Gina Carano, despite the fact that Gal Gadot did do a good job as Wonder Woman. I've always been interested to see what Gina Carano would have been like as Wonder Woman. There was also that case, I think it was Fast and Furious 6 or 7, I can't remember, but both Gal Gadot and Gina Carano were in the role, and everybody refers to that as a kind of auditioning for Wonder Woman. Gal Gadot won throughout in the end, but Gina Carano, I think she does a capable performance. I actually think she's better than what I think a lot of people give her credit for. We all remember she starred way back in the Steven Soderbergh movie Haywire, and I think there was a lot of controversy there because they did voice over her actual performance. I think it's a different actress talking over her role. I think so, but people have deemed her more as just kind of the action because of her UFC history, and they don't really deem her good as an actress. But I think she does a capable job here. She's very good, she's very strong, she's very fearless. You can tell in this show she does a lot of the fight and action sequences on her own. It's always good when you see actors participating more in the stunts themselves. So I thought Gina Carano was really great, and you have other recurring characters in this series throughout. So yeah, that's the bare bones of it. And so obviously with spoiler territory now, the big facet or the big selling point of this series, if you like, is the Baby Yoda character. I think gets discovered at the end of the either the first episode or the second episode, I can't remember now. But yeah, basically that's really the plot device of this series. It's just a bounty hunter protecting Baby Yoda, who exhibits his force powers. Obviously, we know that kind of species. Yoda was the master, of course, and more and more people become aware of Baby Yoda. He's kind of like the prize that the bounty hunter was asked to originally deliver, and then later on he has a change of heart or a crisis of conscience, and he's protecting Baby Yoda in these standalone adventures. That's the crux of it, right? And everybody's been focusing most on Baby Yoda. That's good and bad things in my opinion. It's good in a way you have a distinctive character, but I'll talk about the bad in a moment. But yeah, it's always a great mystery. It's a legacy, of course, following on from Yoda from the movie. So that was really great on there. So yeah, it's just a very easy to get into. Like I said, they went for this standalone approach, so it's nothing too hectic, nothing too complicated, nothing too confusing. You can just jump straight into it, and I think that's the kind of method that they wanted to go for, right? Because it was the front runner for the Disney Plus service, they didn't want to have this kind of complex storyline, kind of like a Game of Thrones, where you need to kind of read up on the books or really in tuned to previous source material to get into this. You don't need to know anything about the previous movies, or if you like the previous novels, or anything to do with the expanded universe of Star Wars. You don't need to know anything about that. This is a series you can literally just turn on and just jump straight into. Okay, it's not overly violent or anything like that. Despite I said there was a dark, gritty tone, there's no kind of foul language or extreme violence. This is very much a family orientated show that you and your kids can enjoy and just be, I think, pleasantly entertained with overall. Okay, so that's really the strengths of The Mandalorian. The weak points for me, and I guess it's more maybe of a particular preference for me, but I mentioned before the standalone structure, which was good, but going back to the whole marketing of Mandalorian, there was a lot of hype about this being a return to form for the Star Wars, and this was going to show us how Star Wars should be done as opposed to the Disney Star Wars movies, which were apparently getting it all wrong. Like I said, you've got the whole debate over that, which I'm not going to touch on too much, but there was a lot of hype about Mandalorian, and for me, I just felt a bit disappointed because of the standalone structure. it just felt too basic, just too much, too easily. Things got resolved so quickly in an episode. I just felt it was lacking in weight, and it just felt a bit one note, a bit throwaway. Like I've just mentioned already, goes on about his mission, protects Baby Yoda, moves on to the next planet. That's it. Now, if you wanted to do that for the first couple of episodes to ease your way into these characters, and you can get much more of a multi-layered storyline towards the end of the series, perfect. Perfect. I think that would have been the best way to do it. But it's just the same structure throughout. And after a while, you're kind of, well, I'm not really looking forward to the next episode of such a Mandalorian, because it's kind of the same thing I'm getting from the previous week. So I'm not as excited for the next episode, right? And after all that hype, for me, I kind of felt shortchanged a bit. There's not as an expansion into the Star Wars universe as I thought people were hoping for. You know, it kind of keeps its ground and sticks to what it knows, never tries to branch out from that. Now, people might argue for a season one, you know, it's just finding its feet, and maybe we might get that expansion in season two, which has already been announced, and maybe season three, which I'm sure we'll get. And okay, you could throw that argument, fair enough, but I just want a bit more to it. I just want a bit more of a compelling element to the Mandalorian, and I just didn't get that. I didn't get that with this series. Again, it just felt a bit repetitive. I wouldn't say boring, but it just felt less interesting as the show went on, and I just wanted a bit more with the show, with the series throughout. Again, nothing too much you could really complain about, but just you know, you just want a bit more. Considering the budget and all the hype and the fact it was Star Wars getting back to its supposed roots, I don't agree. I personally think that Star Wars should be about the Jedi and the Sith and the space battles and the good and evil and the conflict and the Force. To me, that's your quintessential Star Wars. Yes, you can have this other element of Star Wars here, you know, with the bounty hunters and, you know, the broken down bars and the desert landscapes, if you like. Yeah, you can have that element as well, which is what the Mandalorian focuses on. But I like that other element of Star Wars. That's more what makes Star Wars, and to me, rather than getting this show sort of week by week. And just quickly on Baby Yoda, so nothing wrong with the character itself, and the way, you know, the CGI is very good on there as well. But if the main selling point is Baby Yoda, right, and if you go to a lot of people, and particularly when the show aired way back in the US, and the main hype was Baby Yoda, that was it. Right, that was the first. If you go to the Mandalorian and you ask people who've watched the show, what's the best element or what's the most infamous element of the show, everybody will say Baby Yoda. And for me, that's kind of a failure on the show. Especially, again, this is Star Wars. You've got this whole galaxy, you've got these whole races and whole different kind of spaceships and different planets you can go on to, and all these different themes you can go on to. This whole mythology that you can tap into, right? Again, going back to the hype of the show, and all we talk about is Baby Yoda, right? So that means the show hasn't done a good enough job imposing those other elements, getting people engrossed in the other elements, because it's a much more of a standalone structure, right? I think one of the biggest reasons why, if you like, Game of Thrones and Walking Dead have worked so well, apart from the last season of Game of Thrones. But Game of Thrones worked because it was a serialized story. People could get invested in this whole journey, right? And you've got this whole mythological setup, and you can go from different areas here, different areas here, different areas here, and really get you invested in this kind of magical kingdom, if you like. We didn't really get that with the Mandalorian, right? As I said before, it's just a standalone adventure. I actually reckon you could probably watch one episode, miss the next four, go on to episode maybe 5 or 6, and you wouldn't lose out. You wouldn't lose out at all. You just wouldn't, if you like, be any worse off for not watching the entire show, right? And that can be a good thing, but I think for me it wasn't a great thing for the show. I just wanted a bit more, and I think, like I said, if your main selling point is Baby Yoda, to me that's a sign that the show hasn't capitalized on the potential of elements when you're dealing within the whole Star Wars world, right? So again, it was just very basic, bare bones kind of writing style. Wasn't terrible, wasn't horrible. No, like I said, you could always enjoy it on some sort of level, and I completely understand they wanted this as a kind of easy gateway into Disney Plus, get everybody back on side of Star Wars, you know, the whole issue again with the Disney movies was that people felt it messed around too much with canon. It kind of deconstructed these classic iconic heroes, and I think with Mandalorian they just wanted to keep their distance away and just said, right, regardless of what you think about whether canon is kind of being abused or not within the original trilogy, here's something that you don't have to worry about necessarily about canon. You don't have to worry about the original trilogy or the new Star Wars trilogy. You could just sit in and just enjoy it and just take it for what it is within its own wheelhouse. And you don't have to get mired in the whole debate. And I think that was what they were trying to go for with Mandalorian. Very easy to watch, right? So I can understand that, but for me, I just wanted a bit more. So if I'm going to give a rating for Mandalorian, I'm probably going to give it a 6.9 out of 10. I just think production levels were good, performances were spot on, action sequences and special effects were all spot on, high quality, high production value, great, fantastic. But the narrative was just very undemanding for me and not as compelling a series as what I wanted to be. But they could have potential for season 2, and because it's Star Wars, they've got whole room for expansion, and they can go into whatever ventures they go into. People have looked at a lot. It's proven to be very popular. I think season 2 is gonna. I think they've completed a lot or most of the filming for season 2, and I think it's due to debut in October later this year. Obviously, due to this ongoing virus issues, I haven't heard anything so far, but anything being delayed or postponed, I think it's still due to go ahead now. So that's good for Disney Plus as well, because I think a lot of the Marvel superhero shows, Loki, Falcon and Winter Soldier, WandaVision, I think they're all experiencing now postponements or delays. So really, Disney Plus, in terms of new content, correct me if I'm wrong, is really going to rely a lot more on the Mandalorian season 2 as well. So those are my overall thoughts on Mandalorian season 1. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you really like it? Did you think it was better than the kind of more fantastical Star Wars elements? You like this kind of more stripped down Western standalone approach, or were you like me, you just demanded a bit more and you just felt the structure was a bit too simplistic? That's the best way I can put it. Just a bit too simplistic and one note and just not very demanding, and it didn't really fulfill the hype that was surrounding Mandalorian when we saw the trailers coming out. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe as I continue to try and grow this channel. I will provide more updates as we go along. It'd be very interesting just quickly to see on Mandalorian 2. It was recently revealed that Rosario Dawson will be cast as live action Ahsoka. So we all know Ahsoka was the Padawan student for Anakin Skywalker, as we know went on to be Darth Vader later on. Ahsoka is currently in the Clone Wars, which is a CG animated series that's currently going on, season 7 now. That started off really well and it's kind of tailed off a bit, ironically, with Ahsoka's introduction. This story at the moment isn't as good as what the previous one was, but Ahsoka is currently in Star Wars. We know she is in Rebels as well, so it'll be very interesting to see her role in season 2, and I've done a video on that. I'll put a link to it so you could get more of my thoughts on that. But that's my thoughts on Mandalorian. So take care of yourselves for now, stay safe, wash your hands, keep at certain distances, and I will see you very, very soon.